On a February evening in 1975, three teenage boys wandering along the Rocky River in Strongsville, Ohio, stumbled upon a human skeleton lying on a sandbar. The remains were mostly bare bones, no clothing, little flesh, and missing the lower jaw. It was immediately clear that this was no accident. The unknown woman had been shot in the head, execution style. Police and coroner's staff arrived and surveyed the scene. There were scant clues around the Millstream Run reservation. No purse, no ID, not even scraps of clothing to hint at who this young woman was. Under a cloud of uncertainty, authorities in Cuyahoga County were scrambling to find out who killed her. For the time being, this Jane Doe was given an impersonal label: unknown white female bones. With no name to put on a death certificate, she became a number in the coroner's files and cemetery ledgers. Welcome to Fridays with Tony. This is the story of woman 82483. From the start, efforts to identify woman 82483 yielded frustratingly little. Local papers reported on the discovery and the initial investigation, painting a picture of a case that stumped authorities from day one. Police checked missing persons reports and even far-fetched leads. The case file compiled by investigators over the next year showed how desperate and wide-ranging the search had been. They compared this Jane Doe's profile to the names and dental records of missing girls across the county, including a local teenage actress, a young woman associated with the Hells Angels biker gang, and even the infamous heiress, Patty Hearst, who had been abducted in 1974. But every lead went nowhere. Whoever woman 82483 was, her name did not appear in the investigative case file. But every lead went nowhere. Whoever woman 82483 was, her name did not appear in the investigative case file. The name that should have been there was conspicuously absent, but nobody realized it at the time. Meanwhile, a bureaucratic saga was unfolding over what to do with the poor woman's remains. No family had come forward to claim the body. The jurisdictional squabble over who should bear the burial costs became almost absurd. In a morbid front-page story titled "Who Will Bury Skeleton?", the Strongsville News-Sun detailed how the city of Strongsville, the city of Cleveland, and Cuyahoga County all pointed fingers at each other for the $100 burial fee. Dr. Lester Adelson, the deputy coroner, told reporters that if they failed to identify the skeleton, we'll turn it over to the county for a respectable burial in Potter's Field in Highland View Cemetery. But when a journalist dutifully followed up with the county welfare department, they were told, "We don't handle cases like that, only veterans," and redirected to Cleveland City Hall. Cleveland City Hall, in turn, insisted the county handles indigent burials. A county official argued the burial would definitely be Strongsville's responsibility if that is where the body was found, citing a 1965 memo that towns should bury indigents found within their borders. Strongsville's mayor said the city would pay if it is determined we must, but by then the trail of responsibility had run in circles. An exasperated Strongsville law director even speculated that body may be in the coroner's office for the next 2 years. When and if the problem arrives, we'll take care of it. By May of 1975, over 3 months after the discovery, no progress had been made in identifying her. True to Dr. Adelson's word, the county finally arranged a Potter's Field burial. On May 15, 1975, the skeletal remains were interred in Highland Park Cemetery in an unmarked grave. In the cemetery's ledger book, entry number 82483 was recorded as this: name, unknown white female bones. Date of death, 2/5/1975. Date of interment, 5/15/1975. Address, Strongsville, O. Age, about 20. Cause of death, gunshot wound of head. By the end of 1975, the local authorities had exhausted their leads and resources. Without modern databases or interagency communication, woman 82483 slipped through the cracks. Due to what was likely a clerical oversight, her case never made it into the national registries of unidentified remains either. She became, as one reporter later wrote, all but forgotten except by her family. But unbeknownst to anybody, a family in Akron, Ohio was desperately searching for their 17-year-old girl who never came home in 1974. In the early 2000s, the advent of the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, nameless, and volunteer groups like the Doe Network offered new hope that old Jane Doe cases could be cataloged and solved. But this particular case was nowhere to be found in these databases. A crucial spelling error, the word unknow instead of unknown, in some records, may have contributed to the oversight, literally coding her identity out of existence in digital systems. By the mid-2010s, the unidentified Strongsville homicide was effectively invisible to all but a few officials. It was as if she never existed. But fate and curiosity intervened in the form of an amateur sleuth with a keen eye. In 2014, Christina Skates, a 23-year-old college student at Cleveland State University, was combing through old cemetery ledgers for a genealogy project when something caught her attention. Amid the many names and dates, one entry stood out as heartbreakingly sparse. White female bones, number 82483. The fact that this entry lacked a real name signaled that the woman had never been identified. The young researcher felt a jolt of empathy and injustice. As she later told reporters, "I couldn't believe how many unknown bones were in that cemetery index. It was at the back of my mind, nagging at me. I thought I should do something." Skates jotted down the details from the cemetery index. She called the Highland Park Cemetery office to confirm, but they had nothing more to add. Driven by a mix of curiosity and compassion, Christina Skates began digging deeper. She visited local libraries and threaded through rolls of microfilmed newspapers from 1975. Sure enough, she found the old articles about the skeleton of a young woman found along the Rocky River, and the failed identification efforts. The story of bureaucratic finger-pointing over the burial popped up as well. Each new tidbit confirmed what she feared. This case had slipped through the cracks of the system, likely due to confusion over jurisdiction and the passage of time. As Skates later noted, multiple agencies thought someone else was handling it, and that probably contributed to her not being listed in any databases. With a file of photocopied news clippings and notes in hand, Christina Skates reached out to authorities. She tried contacting a detective in the city of Strongsville, but there was no response. She tried the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's office. At first, they too had little to offer. Initial phone inquiries hit dead ends. In one telling instance, Skates spoke with a Cleveland Metro Parks ranger. Lieutenant Don Silvis of the Metro Parks actually remembered the case and managed to locate the entire 100-page case file for her. That was a breakthrough. Silvis provided Christina with copies of the original police reports, autopsy report, and case file on the Strongsville Jane Doe. Now she had in her hands the full record of the investigation, including the forensic details, crime scene descriptions, and even a black and white photo of the victim's skull. Reading through the file, Skates learned intriguing facts that hadn't been in the brief news articles. The coroner's autopsy in 1975, for instance, described how the bullet had pierced the skull and noted the extreme decomposition. It also documented unusual post-mortem damage. In addition to the missing mandible, saw marks were found on the skull, where some front teeth had been removed. This grisly detail strongly implied the killer attempted to hinder identification, confirming this was no random suicide or accident in the woods, but a concealed murder. The case file also listed specific missing persons whose dental records had been compared over the years. Christina Skates now knew more than perhaps anyone currently in law enforcement about woman 82483. But knowledge alone wouldn't bring back the woman's name. Skates needed to amplify the case and get it into the hands of those who could act. So in January of 2015, she turned to the internet sleuthing community. Under the username u/callmeice, she composed a post for the Reddit forum r/unresolved mysteries titled "Unidentified Gunshot Victim Not Listed in Databases." In her post, she carefully laid out the story: a Jane Doe from a Cleveland suburb murdered in 1974-75, whose case had fallen through the cracks and was not in nameless or any state listings. She provided the cemetery info and dates, and even transcribed the old news articles for context. The plea was implicit. She was asking for help, or at least spreading awareness of this forgotten victim. "If there are any questions, I will do my best to answer," she offered in closing. The Reddit post gained traction quickly. Other users were intrigued and disturbed by the story of official neglect. Comments poured in, some praising Skates for refusing to let the case die, others speculating about conspiracies. One commenter noted the huge trail of inefficiency in the burial saga, quipping that the runaround seemed designed to discourage anyone from pursuing the case. Skates herself chimed in on the thread, reporting updates. She had obtained an uncertified copy of the autopsy, confirmed the woman was indeed still unidentified as of 2015, and was pursuing getting her entered into nameless. She was relentless, contacting the Strongsville police, the Cuyahoga ME's office, even the park rangers again, and the county sheriff. From Reddit, the story jumped to Web Sleuths, a popular true crime discussion forum. A fellow sleuth reposted Skates' write-up there in February 2015. Since Reddit links weren't directly allowed on the site, under the thread title Ohio Strongsville WHT FEM UP 15394 1525 in Rocky River Feb 75. The Web Sleuths community began pooling knowledge. Skates collaborated with forum members, answering questions and sharing plans. Users started suggesting missing persons that might match the Jane Doe's profile. A 21-year-old woman, Joanne Coughlin, missing from Youngstown in late 1974, was one early candidate. Another mentioned was Charlotte Brown, who vanished from Cleveland in 1973. Sharon Praetorius, a 13-year-old missing from Akron in 1973, was brought up, but deemed too young. Patricia Steelbaugh, missing from Pennsylvania in 1973, was also considered due to geographic proximity. The crowd was brainstorming, but no one had yet made a successful connection. One crucial development was that the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office responded to Skates' persistence. Realizing that this case was indeed missing from their active cold case list, the ME's office agreed it should be entered into nameless, the federal database for unidentified remains. By mid-2015, largely thanks to Skates' advocacy, the case information was compiled and submitted. Nameless assigned the Strongsville Jane Doe a case number and publicly listed her profile, describing a white female, 15 to 25, found February 5, 1975 with a gunshot wound to the head. For the first time in 40 years, woman 82483 was officially on the books as an unresolved, unidentified person. In December 2016, nearly 2 years after the renewed push began, a breakthrough occurred, and it came from the missing persons side of the equation. By then, the Strongsville Jane Doe had been circulating in law enforcement bulletins and online forums. Carl Koppelman, a California-based forensic artist and prominent Web Sleuths member, had been following the case closely. Carl had even received the autopsy skull photo from Skates and created a detailed facial reconstruction illustration of the Jane Doe, It was a challenging reconstruction given the skull's condition, but Carl persisted and eventually sketched a lifelike image of a young woman's face, hoping it might jog someone's memory. He shared the artwork on web sleuths and social media, attaching it to the still anonymous case. Then came the crucial nameless connection. Anjanette Fisher, the missing persons liaison at the Cuyahoga County ME's office, had entered the Jane Doe's data into nameless in June 2016 after Carl, the artist who had created the sketch, inquired why it wasn't there. On the other side of the ledger in Summit County, police were reviewing cold cases. Sergeant Jeff Smith of the Akron Police Department's Missing Persons Unit was assigned in late 2016 to take a fresh look at the department's oldest unsolved cases, one of which was the 1974 disappearance of Linda Marie Pagano. Linda's case had languished for decades, with no leads. She was last seen on September 1, 1974, after a family dispute, and at 17 years old, had seemingly vanished without a trace. Sergeant Smith, promoted by Fisher, decided to leverage nameless. He searched the database for unidentified remains that might match Linda Pagano's profile. Immediately, Strongsville Jane Doe popped up as a potential match. The timing, age, and location were eerily consistent with Linda's disappearance. Strongsville is roughly 30 miles northwest of Akron. The Jane Doe died of a gunshot wound around the same time Linda went missing, and the age was within a couple of years of Linda's 17. In Akron, police detectives contacted Linda Pagano's surviving siblings to gather dental records and DNA reference samples. In Cleveland, the medical examiner's office pulled the Jane Doe's case off the shelf, and forensic odontologists got to work. On December 13, 2016, Dr. Kent Caserta, a forensic dentist, compared Linda's dental records with the Jane Doe's remains. The match was compelling. In fact, dental work and x-rays strongly indicated they were one and the same. It was not yet a 100% confirmation, but it was enough to label Linda Pagano as the prime candidate for woman 82483. Linda's sister Cheryl was informed of the tentative match and later said the family pretty much figured it was her at that point. Still, standard procedure required a DNA confirmation. Given the decades that had passed, Linda's skeletal remains needed to be exhumed from her pauper's grave for testing. In mid-2017, the Cuyahoga County Medical Examiner's Office navigated legal and logistical hurdles, consulting with county officials, obtaining court orders, and pinpointing the exact location of grave number 82483 in the sprawling Potter's Field. The University of Akron's archaeology department lent their expertise, using ground-penetrating tools to map unmarked graves in the area. In October 2017, crews carefully dug into the earth and exhumed the remains of Strongsville's Jane Doe. Decades after Dr. Charles Hirsch, the original coroner in 1975, had examined those bones, they saw daylight once more. And as Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Thomas Gilson noted, they were consistent with those examined by Hirsch in the 1970s. In other words, nothing had changed. They were still the same young woman wanting to get her name back. Bone samples from the exhumed remains were sent to the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification, a leading lab for forensic DNA, while Linda Pagano's siblings provided DNA swabs for comparison. By early summer 2018, the results were in. On June 29, 2018, the DNA analysis conclusively confirmed what many already believed. Woman 82483 was Linda Pagano. After 43 years, Linda was home. On July 12, 2018, law enforcement officials from Cleveland and Akron held a press conference to announce the identification. Michael Pagano, Linda's brother, was there, as was her sister Cheryl. The Pagano siblings, now in late middle age, finally had the answer to the question that had tormented them since 1974. "I thought this day would never come. I thought I would die wondering," Michael said, describing the mixture of relief and sadness that comes with finding the remains of a long-lost loved one. He expressed gratitude to all involved. "This is just amazing. I had no idea all these people were involved in all this. I'm totally shocked." Cheryl Pagano, in an earlier interview, conveyed a similar sentiment, with a tinge of disappointment. Grateful to know Linda's fate, but hurt that the system failed to identify her sooner. Over 40 years later and still no killer identified, she noted, highlighting that justice had not been fully served. Christina Skates, the young woman whose dogged efforts reignited the case, was hailed as a hero by the family and media. Michael Pagano got to meet Christina in person after the press conference. The two shared a long hug. With Linda's identity no longer a mystery, the focus shifts to her unsolved murder. Investigators now had to piece together Linda's final days and consider who might have had motive and opportunity to shoot her and dump her body in the metro parks. Suspicion immediately turned to the last person who admitted seeing Linda alive, her stepfather, Byron Claflin. Linda's backstory, as reconstructed by family and police, is sadly typical of many teen disappearances. In the summer of 1974, Linda and her siblings, Mike and Cheryl, were staying with their stepdad Byron in his Akron apartment, while their mother was temporarily living elsewhere. Byron Claflin was known to have a volatile temper and drank regularly, though Linda wasn't known to clash with him much before. On the night of August 31st, 1974, Linda attended a rock concert, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, in Cleveland, with her boyfriend, and got home in the early hours of September 1st. Byron was furious that she came home so late. They argued loudly around 3 a.m. According to Byron's account, he ended up throwing the 17-year-old out of the house, telling her to go to her father's or another relative's place. He claimed Linda left the apartment on foot that night, walking off into the darkness after their fight. She never came back. At first, some assumed Linda might have run away because of the argument, but her close friends and family doubted that. Linda was described as honest, hard-working, and shy, not someone likely to disappear voluntarily. When she failed to show up for work or school, the Pagano family reported her missing to Akron police. Byron Claflin was questioned. His story remained that she left walking. Intriguingly, Linda's car also went missing that night, a detail that came out later. Reports indicate that Linda's car, which she had driven to the concert and back, somehow vanished from Akron after her disappearance and was found crushed in a junkyard in Salem, Ohio not long after, before it could be analyzed. This means that whoever was responsible for Linda's death likely also disposed of her vehicle, destroying potential evidence. Salem, Ohio is about 50 miles southwest of Akron, a location that would be out of the way for Linda if she had truly left on foot. This damning clue points toward foul play by someone with access to her car, someone like a stepfather, perhaps, who might have wanted to hide blood or other evidence. Byron Claflin was always a person of interest. In fact, Akron police did name him publicly as such after Linda's remains were identified. However, two big obstacles stand in the way of resolving his culpability: time and death. Claflin died in 1990, never facing any charges related to Linda's case. By the time Linda was identified in 2018, Byron had been in his grave for nearly 30 years. Thus, if he indeed killed Linda, he escaped earthly justice. The Pagano siblings have little doubt in their hearts. They told reporters they believe Linda's stepfather may have been responsible. It's not hard to see why. Byron was alone with her that night. He had a temper, he gave an unlikely account, and he had every reason to lie if he had hurt her. Nonetheless, with Byron deceased, investigators must consider alternate scenarios too. Could someone else have encountered Linda after she left home? Perhaps Linda did storm out on foot initially, Could she have then accepted a ride from a stranger or acquaintance, meeting a predator on the road? The location where her body was found is near major routes, fueling speculation that she might have been hitchhiking or picked up by a passing motorist. The mid-1970s were a dangerous time for young women on the road in northern Ohio. Serial killer Ted Bundy murdered a victim in the region in 1978, and other violent offenders were active. However, there's no direct evidence tying Linda's death to an unknown serial killer or a random crime. The state of her remains suggests a perpetrator who took time to conceal the crime, which could either fit a calculating stranger or someone in her inner circle. In the years after 1975, without knowing the body was Linda's, investigators had floated other theories. The fact that she was found in the metro parks led some to wonder if there was a connection to other park system crimes. Cleveland's metro parks are generally safe, but a few notorious cases, like the 1969 murder of Mary King, had occurred there. Organized crime was mentioned by the locals as a far-flung possibility given Cleveland's mob wars of the 1970s, but nothing concrete linked Linda to any such danger. Investigators in 1974 did search for Linda's car and likely had suspicions about Byron, but without a body or evidence, they couldn't charge him. Now, with Linda's body found and identified, police have reopened the homicide investigation under the Cleveland Metro Parks Police. Lieutenant Don Silvis, the same ranger who helped Christina Skates all those years later, is leading the investigation, determined to pursue any leads and, if possible, bring Linda's killer to justice. But realistically, justice may be elusive. The primary suspect is dead. There will be no trial. Police will nonetheless re-examine all evidence to ensure no other person was involved or responsible. They plan to re-interview surviving witnesses and family members with the new information at hand. The hope is that perhaps Byron confided in someone before his death, or that new forensic techniques could connect dots. For instance, retesting Linda's clothing if any had been preserved, although it's doubtful given that she was found unclothed. They will also consider any similar cases or patterns. Was any other young woman from the area found in a similar condition? So far, nothing obvious has emerged. Thanks for joining me for another edition of Fridays with Tony. Linda's life was taken by a cruel act of violence, but thanks to the perseverance of a few determined individuals, her truth was finally brought to light. Linda Marie Pagano has her name back, and with it, a voice that will echo whenever her story is told. I hope you'll join me next week for another unusual, unsettling, and possibly unsolved story. Remember to like and subscribe. See you then.